Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the concept of manufacturing or creating public consent. Now, this could be consent over government policy or consent over whatever, anything. But this is something that was brought up as a concept, and a phrase was brought up by Noam Chomsky, and it was very much considered left-wing sort of compulsory reading. Now, and I'll paraphrase here, but what Chomsky was arguing is that consent, public consent, is artificially manufactured. Say on television, for example, because this was pre-internet when Chomsky wrote this. Consent is manufactured, he would argue, artificially by preventing the serious issues, in Chomsky's view, the serious issues from being discussed. They don't see the light of day, they don't get funding, they don't get attention, people don't get to hear about them. And so Chomsky argued, again, I'm paraphrasing here, Chomsky argued that because in TV, advertisers of products, whether it be whatever it is, cars or I don't know, laundry detergent or anything, they want to be good, wholesome family entertainment type stuff. So they don't want their product associated with weird and far out there crazy views. So this created, if you like, a filter on what the public could see, because there's no point in making a documentary about transgender activism because no sponsors, advertisers, that's how the TV stations made their money. No advertiser would want to be associated with that. So that documentary or movie or whatever it was about promoting transgenderism, that would be pushed out to the far fringes of, college kid type campus consumption. It wasn't for the mainstream. So, and that could be the same for any issue that the radical feminist gender, lesbian this and so on, so that race hustling, none of that stuff was it had to be quite tame and woven into a much wider story. Otherwise, advertisers wouldn't touch it. And that meant that the TV stations or media outlets generally, it could be a TV station, remember this is pre-internet, or the newspapers, they wouldn't touch it because advertisers wouldn't pay for advertising space in and around that. So, and now Chomsky argued, well, this means that the real serious issues of transgender and this and so on, they're not getting seen in the mainstream because these advertisers won't pay for it. Now, he perceived this as a form of censorship, really. I mean, at a serious stretch, you possibly could argue that, but then you could argue it the other way, that there are also serious issues about other things that that advertisers don't want to be associated with. It isn't exclusively that the left was being restricted in its voices. Because they wanted to be radical activists, they would complain, well, why won't the mainstream have our radical activism and feature it prominently? Well, of course they weren't going to. I mean, what an idiot question or idiot assumption to make. Now, the essence of it was that the majority of the population, the 90% plus or 95% plus, were being protected from radical activist views. So the 5% were perceived themselves as hard done by, or being denied a voice, or not have enough of a voice. Now, they had a voice. They had their radical magazines and radical newspapers and radical pamphlets, and they had their activist groups screaming and bellowing up and down the university campuses. They still had that, but they were a small minority. They were a fringe voice that kind of nobody really took any notice of. So, their distribution of there was a radical lesbian magazine in Sydney some years ago, and they had a distribution, like other than the university student unions that were buying subscriptions of it, I mean, nobody was reading this stuff, was looking at it. It was just something for a few universities, and again, the Students' Union that were buying it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have got off the ground. It shows, by the way, the round robin between activists and then pots of money and how they circulate it around. So the Student Union agrees to buy a subscription for the Radical Lesbian magazine that then funds them setting up so they can then distribute radical lesbian propaganda at the expense of university students, none of whom or few of whom have ever agreed to it anyway. Nonetheless, the majority were being saved from the minority here, or protected from the minority holding these radical views. What we've seen now is a complete reversal of that 5%. I don't think the number of activists is really any greater than it was then, if so, by a small margin. But now they control what we're allowed to see or not allowed to see. So the 5% now pushing their radical views and injecting it directly into the mainstream, and that you can't make a documentary or a movie today without having these radical views contained within it. Otherwise, you won't get funding. And you won't get any sort of governmental support or tax write-offs, so this sort of thing. Now, this is part of the globalist takeover. They've used the activism of the 5%, and they've aggressively and brutally used it against the 95%. So instead of the 95% deciding what should be seen and heard in terms of political discourse, we now have the 5% deciding that. But they are the foot soldier, flunky stooges, the gobblers for the globalists, because the 5% directly aggressively promote, and destroy social cohesion, and that's what the globalists want. So the 5% are just the useful fools. Coming back now to the issue of say, manufacturing consent today. Now, across the Western world, whether it be Britain or Australia, there are documentaries being made of why don't you go back where you came from, and these are just outright political propaganda, screeching propaganda, and they horribly misrepresent and lace with the most grotesque untruths the view that mass migration is something natural, organic, and is humanitarian. So there's one recently in Britain, and there've been a number of them in Australia as well. And again, the misrepresentation is outrageous. So here's a few sort of things that well, these people come here, they should get our help because they've lost everything. And well, stop, hold on a minute. Why are they in the rich first world country? They've had to pass through 11 different countries to get here. If they're a refugee, then they go to the first safe country. That's glossed over or ignored completely. There's sort of some, I guess you'd call it, metaphysics of of using all sorts of misunderstandings and interpretations of international law, saying, well, in the case of, say, Australia or Britain, in 1947, Britain and Australia signed the International Human Convention Rights on Refugees. But if you actually look at the wording, it's you go to the first safe country. The argument is that some of the first safe countries maybe haven't signed that refugee convention, therefore they're not obligated by international law to take these people as refugees. That's not true either, because refugee camps have been set up in all these places, and these governments are obligated to allow a refugee camp to operate. So these people have lost everything. Well, hold on, stop. There's photographs then of a bunch of, like a destroyed street or a blown up building or something like that. And is that where they live? I mean, was that their house? I mean, we don't know. It's a pile of rubble. But the reality is these people came from outer rural areas, and they only ever lived in grass huts, and so they've lost their grass hut or something. I mean, but that's what they came from. So they should come to a first world country and be given a nice new brick building to live in. They've never known running water in a house or electric lights or flushing toilets. So they're suddenly entitled to that because it's humanitarian. But they never came from that sort of environment. So the implication is that these are middle-class people who've lost their their middle class, brick home in a nice downtown, quiet, clean, safe area of. And they've lost that, and so they have to come to. Well, hold on, wait, stop. They never had that anyway, ever. So the idea that this is an entitlement they thus have is in itself, an outrageous bit of propaganda. Okay, so they've lost everything, but what did they have? What did they lose? Did they lose, their Louis XIV table and chairs and dining setting? Is that what they lost? Did they lose all their computers? Did they lose their brand new car that they just put? No, they didn't own any of those things. They didn't have anything even remotely resembling a Western lifestyle. So they've become a third world country in their grass hut with their goats and their donkey and the cart. They've come from that into a first world country because they're entitled to that. But they were in a refugee camp anyway, and they had free medical, dental. They had a far better standard of living there than they ever had, living out in the rural middle of nowhere in these third world shitholes. So what exactly are they? How are they losing everything? I don't even understand. So those out and out lies. Then they switch it around and imply that this is in these propaganda documentaries, that the people coming from these countries actually speak very good English. Excellent English, actually, and they're very well dressed. They're quite sophisticated people, and they just have suffered some sort of misadventure and misfortune. So why shouldn't they come to a rich white Western country, from their basket case? So. Well, no, they don't. That's not the sort of migrant or refugee or that comes that speaks excellent English and the way they present it is that the refugee speaks excellent English and is vastly more sophisticated than those working class white troglodytes, those Nazis, and so they're entitled to be treated with the respect. They're infinitely more morally superior, intellectually superior in every way to those working class white fascist Nazi Hitlers. Quick shot of a swastika. Can we have a skinhead with a swastika tattooed in the head? Just quickly put that in. Okay, all right, we've got that. And this is these aren't the people that come to the West, from these places that speak excellent English and so what bullshit. So they try and interpose, and 1 minute they're downtrodden peasants who've lost everything and have nothing. Then the next they're sophisticated people who are infinitely superior to white people. No. If the only people that came to the West are the ones that spoke excellent English and had qualifications and skills, and then it wouldn't be a problem, because there are hardly any of those people anyway. If you look at the amount of people in an average third world country that speak good English, have first world qualifications, then you're talking about a handful of people in the whole country, and most of those people are well connected and doing well, and from rich mafia-like goon families that control vast swathes of the economy. Well, what would they want to migrate to England for? Live in some 3-bedroom brick. They live in mansions while they are with armies of servants. So then the levels of lies and misrepresentation are just off the charts, and they fail to address the real issues and fail to address anything other than these people are just parasites coming for all the free stuff. Instead, they try and project it as they're just put upon people, and the only folks that may object to it are just all Nazis. Simple as that. Not only are they Nazis, they're probably Hitler personally. So, but this propaganda is used all over the Western world, again, Britain, Australia, and so on. Also, there's images of people touring some war-torn area or some dilapidated, rundown third world area or something, but it's already a third world shithole. This isn't a first world country that's gone through great misfortune. Let's be clear on that. That's how they present it, though, that it was some perfect paradise and that it all went to shit. So all these people, of course, have to be looked after. We're obligated. Why are we obligated? Well, because if you don't, you're a Nazi. That's why. So they tour these areas and try and pretend that this is what's happened to these people's country or city. Now, it may be an area, say there's a civil war or so on, or something else going on, two mafia groups fighting each other, and that sort of thing, and that is unfortunate. But that's for that country and those people to sort that out. And taking other countries' problems doesn't sort it out. It at best is a temporary alleviation, and these people never fit into the West anyway. 2-3 generations down the track, they're still living in their ghetto enclaves. So it's not a solution for anybody anywhere. But it's something the globalists are fixated on, and so their propaganda machine just pumps and pumps and pumps. Now, if diversity and mass migration and this and that are so good, you don't need any propaganda. You don't have to tell the lies. The benefits are self-evident to all. But this idea that the only people that don't see the benefits must be Nazis is absolute bullshit. And it's just an extension of the evil propaganda machine they use to impose mass migration upon us. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.